Hi folks, welcome back to Game Geeks. I'm your host, Kurt Wiegel. Today's episode, we are going to be reviewing the Dresden Files role-playing game by Evil Hat Studios. Way back, many centuries ago, in the early years of Game Geeks on YouTube. There are two reviews in there that you should go back and take a look at. One of them is of Spirit of the Century, which is a pulp-era game using the Fate system, and a special guest shot with my good friend Isaias Acosta, in which we discussed how the Fate engine itself works. There. At that time, I knew the Evil Hat Studios was discussing the possibility of making a Dresden Files role-playing game, and indeed, in fact, had started down that path. What I have in my hands now are the two books that will make up that line in the very near future. One of these, called Volume 1, Your Story, contains the rules and how to use the Fate system and all of the add-ons that they've made in the Dresden Files verse. The second, Our World, is an incredibly comprehensive description of the setting, characters, organizations, and powers of the Dresden Files universe, as up to and including the book Small Favor. We are now 2 books past that. So does this date it? Only slightly. And I would also point out that this is spoilerific, ladies and gentlemen. So if you're one of these, well, I haven't read all the books, but I really want to, don't get too far into this book. So, what are the Dresden Files? It is a book series by Jim Butcher. It is what I call an urban fantasy game in which it is our world, magic is real, and the main character is Harry Dresden, a wizard PI in Chicago, and the various antics, organizations, groups that he gets involved with and fights in his quest to basically keep people safe from the supernatural. As of the time of this recording, the Dresden Files role-playing game is available in pre-order form from Evil Hat Studios. And when you pre-order the books, you also get the early release PDFs. We're going to spend most of our time going through Your Story. The Fate engine, as we discussed earlier, is sort of atypical in that it doesn't have a set of predetermined attributes and a skill set. What it has is you define your attributes in terms of your history, your background, and what you can do, called aspects. There is a skill group you work with, but it's very broadly defined, everything from academics to weapons to lore. Special abilities are bought in the form of the stunts, which are specific applications of your skills. This game runs off of fate points, which allow you to activate your aspects, activate some of your stunts, or to use those aspects against or for you or against someone else in the environment, or what you think someone that you're dealing with has. This game also goes into, because it's a Dresden Files game, it has to be able to do things like magic. It has to be able to do things like vampiric powers, werewolf abilities, the fairy, etc. These are done through the supernatural powers. What's really interesting about these is when you make a character, if you're one of these power types, be it wizard, fairy, be it werewolf, vampire, whatever, you can really, with this, build almost anything you want from the building blocks they give you. Each power costs you a certain number of refresh, or the number of fate points you get back at the end of every adventure or whenever your GM sees fit to give them to you. So the more powerful you are, the less control you have over what happens to your character. Also, along these lines, if you ever drop below 1, so up to 1, you're still playable. 0 or below, you're really not a mortal character. You're really not a mortal or a playable character because you have 0 in the way of choice. It really balances out. You have the freedom of choice or free will and nature. The more powerful and monstrous you are, the more your nature controls you, and there's less choice of what you have. I could go on for hours about how you make characters in Magic. I kind of have to go through this simply and quickly. So in addition to character creation, it also allows you to do a city creation. That is, because the Dresden Files are set in Chicago, you can build the city of your choice as you go through this. They give you an example one of Baltimore and how you can take the Dresden Files verse and create a city of your choice. So what you do is you kind of go through looking at its history. You build these cities' aspects. You build some of its nature. Is that nature a challenge, a benefit, or a threat to your characters. Your city itself will have a theme. What is the theme of your city? Is it fighting back decay or obsessed with its own past? So from there, your players actually should get intimately involved in a lot of developing this city and tie in some of their own aspects and some of their own history to the city. Really, the way Chicago is developed in the Dresden Files series is absolutely phenomenal, that you can really see how a lot of work has gone into understanding the history, the nature of that city. You should do the exact same thing in developing your own setting. Having player buy-in, and especially how the themes and the threats and how these can tie in with your own development, will really help you understand and help your characters get bought in to that setting. Also in this, there's a way to develop your own organizations, either from the small to the world-spanning and beyond, that your characters can be either involved in either as allies, as members, or as opponents. So everything from the Order of St. Giles to the Venente Umborum, to the White Council itself, to the various vampire courts, to the fairy courts, to the Denarians. All of these, you can build your own unique versions of these for your own Dresden world. Now, from this book, you make your characters, you make your city. Spell creation itself could get an entire episode. Is this a complicated game? Honestly, no. Fate itself is very straightforward. There are a lot of rules and there is a substantial amount of crunch. It just has the crunch in different places than most games do. So rather than a lot of combat detail, there's a lot of how to work with your players in order to make the story you're interested in detail. As I mentioned, the spell creation itself is very nice. I've gone through it several times, come up with my own spells. You have your power rank in shifts that are based off of a conviction skill, and that's how much juice you can effectively throw around with minimal stress on yourself. You can buy refinements. You have items that can help you focus your will. Then my personal favorite bit in this is it actually includes sponsored magic, which is your power doesn't come from yourself and innate understanding of magic. You're a knight of the she courts. Therefore, your power is limited by what your she queen is willing to give you. That is the Your Story book. Our world, substantially smaller, but this is probably the best summary of the Dresden verse you're going to find. As in addition to having descriptions of all of the organizations and most of the major characters and antagonists that you'll run into, it also gives you fairly well-developed stat blocks for every one of those if you see the need to incorporate them or versions of them in your story. At the very beginning, it sort of gives you some of the more vanilla mortals that you're likely to run into, or, oh, look, it's a cop. So most of the cop stats are going to be the same. But then it gets into descriptions of the people you're likely to run into. For example, Ebenezer McCoy, who is Harry Dresden's mentor, and gives some really nice descriptions of that character and how you can use that in your game. As I mentioned at the time of this filming, these books are available in PDF form when you pre-order the books themselves. I've done so. I got these as comped review copies, and I was so excited by what I read, I went right out and pre-ordered them. They are fantastic, beautifully made, full-color books that will last a good long time. I have player copies for my table now. This is a game I absolutely see us playing, my group playing, in the near future. We're excited about it. If you like urban fantasy, treat yourself to the novels if you haven't already. If you like urban fantasy and if you want a game that is specifically built for the Dresden verse, this is the way to go for you. Character development, city setting development, organization, a powerful yet flexible build your own spell magic system, all of which are tied into the Fate engine, which allows you and your players to have a lot of control over what happens. It's a game that you really can't go wrong with. For Game Geeks, I'm your host, Kurt Wiegel. Good day and good gaming.